I try to keep mine bigger. Pear shape, still bigger. Beach ball, that's bigger. Dear Heavenly Father, we welcome you into this house and ask your Holy Spirit to dwell amongst us as we study your word. Bring us discernment in the word. May we have understanding that how it applied then still applies now. We ask this in Jesus' name. Many people say that, well, that was the past. That's not now. But things that happened in the past don't happen now. People don't change. And they say, well, people change. No, they don't. Not really. Historically, people are still the same. You still have murderers, thieves, kidnappers. You still have, people that take advantage of other people. Tell people that lie through their teeth so they can get away with stuff. People get away with stuff like that. Okay, we're going to talk about a place, Jericho. But to get to there, we're going to start with Joshua, the son of Nun, secretly sent 2 spies to Shittim. Go look over the land, he said, especially Jericho. So they went and entered the house of a prostitute named Rahab. We know about Rahab from the last study lesson because she took them in, hid them, and when the authorities came to her house, yes, she did lie somewhat, but it's called half-truths, still a lie. People call it today, why don't you tell a little white lie? Why don't you tell a little white lie? I didn't tell them everything. But she lied and said that they were here, but they left. And when they went, I have no idea. Right? So part of that is the truth. She didn't have any idea where they were going to go. How would she know? But she did know that God was with them. Because she said, she went up to the roof and said to them, I know that the Lord has given you this land, and that a great fear of you has fallen on us, so that all who live in this country are melting in fear because of you. We heard how the Lord dried up the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did at Silo and Og, the 2 kings of the Amorites east of the Jordan, whom you completely destroyed. And when we, the city of Jericho, heard of this, our hearts melted in fear, and everyone's courage fell because of you. The Lord your God is in heaven above and on the earth below. So, one of the great things about rumors, and as humans, we've used it in battles throughout history. And one of the things that to do to encourage people to fight harder is to tell them all the negative things that the other team has done. You ever watched Knight's Tale? Okay, before they get into jousting, he said there was the other guy, he raised taxes 3 times just to support his jousting habit. Making people suffer while he eats the fatted calf. And it makes people intensely more angry. Okay, well, word of what God had did to the Red Sea and what he had done to these 2 massive armies got back to Jericho. And they were worried because they knew they were coming. Okay, but the people of Israel, they didn't think any greatness of their army. They knew greatness of God. They didn't think greatness of their army. But whenever Rahab, she asks that when you take over the city, keep me and my family safe. Okay? Do not bring any harm to them because I helped you. Okay? And when they went to leave, he says, our lives for your lives have been assured her. If you don't tell them what we're doing, we will treat you kindly and faithfully if the Lord gives us the land. So she let him down by rope, and they went on their way. One of the things that they told her was, make sure your whole family is in the house and tie a red scarlet rope around the window so that when we attack, we'll know that's where one place we let go. Now, one of the things that's symbolic about this in their existence is linguistic meaning of hope and expectation. Hebrew word is tikvah, which means to wait for or to expect. Now, in the Bible, there's many different instances of a scarlet indicator of Passover. One of them is when the Israelites were escaping Egypt, the very last plague that hit Egypt was the angel of death when he passed over, and they took red blood from a lamb and put it over their doorstep, so that the angel of death would then pass by this house and not kill anybody inside the house. Okay, so that's one of the things that's symbolic about this escape with Rahab, is that she was told that whoever would be saved had to be in the house. It couldn't be, there weren't going to be red scarlet ropes around several different houses. They said, tie a red or scarlet rope on your house, and whoever you want to save will be in this house. That's it. Everybody else is subject to the sword, so to speak. Like I said, about Passover lamb and blood was painted on the doorposts. In Genesis 38, they talk about a red was tied around the wrist of Zerah, a twin in the lineage of Judah, to mark his birthright. So there's some symbolism in red scarlet and the red scarlet. They also talk about your sins are like scarlet; they'll be washed clean as snow. Okay. Leviticus scarlet yarn was used in ritual cleansing ceremonies for leprosy. And in Matthew 27:27, Roman soldiers mockingly placed a scarlet robe on Jesus before his crucifixion and unintentionally marking him as a sacrificial king. So, doing things, they probably thought, red scarlet robe, this will be marked like a scarlet letter, so to speak, right? If you ever read the scarlet letter, there was a priest who was having an adulterous affair with a young lady, and she was on to be pregnant, but she was not wed. So they put a scarlet A on her being, her dress or whatever, and she was mocked as being an adulteress. Okay, meaning she had outside a marital affair. She was pregnant without a husband, and she wore the scarlet to her death because she didn't want to put the priest to shame.
Remember what the priest of preacher was? He carved A on his chest. And eventually, I think it became effective not. He also wore this.
They didn't show it to everybody.
No, nobody could see that.
Yeah.
They were Puritans.
Yeah.
It was highly.
Yeah, so to me, doing it in secret, the old phrase in the military, they used to tell you people, they say, well, you praise in public and you chastise in public and private. And the reason for that is you don't put on display the negativities of others. Okay? If that preacher did that A, right, he should have done it going A and fessed up. It would have ruined his entire political career, because at the time, many of the priests or the preachers were political. They ruled the town. Whenever something had to be done, they'd come and ask the preacher what he thought. So, but that's one of the examples of it. But after the spies came out of Jericho, it said later on in Jericho, in Joshua 13,
20 years.
So when Joshua was going to go into Jericho, it says, now when Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him. Now, let's back up a little bit because there's something I need to cover before that. Before they crossed into the land of Jericho, Joshua told the people that they must prepare themselves to enter into the promised land. Now, we talked about this before whenever God told them that they had to wash and do certain rituals before they could come into the presence of God. Now, God is so holy that even that little bit of ritualistic things you do, you can't enter in close to him, right? And even when you go into heaven, they say that you never really see God, okay? Because, it's just, more than, you can handle. But you have the purity of Christ that's on you when you die and go to heaven. You attain a perfect spiritual body. You know,
So
so
does it say anywhere in scripture that we don't see God?
it's something I've read somewhere.
You know, if you can find that, I'd be interested to know the reference. I don't think the Bible addresses it. As mortals, you can't. But when we get to heaven, I'm not saying we can, but I don't remember reading anything specific saying that we can. It'd be interesting to know whether it
But as humans, we are imperfect. But in consecrating themselves, Joshua got up in the morning and said to all the Israelites, set out for and went to the Jordan, where they camped before the crossing over. And after 3 days, the officers went throughout the camp, giving orders to the people. And when you see the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord your God and the Levitical priest carrying it, you are to move out from your positions and follow it. Then you will know which way to go, since you have never been this way before. Keep a distance of the 2 cubits, or 2,000 cubits, between you and the Ark. Do not go near it. Even the Ark of the Covenant, you can't get too near it. If you remember back in earlier, when the Ark was given, later on in the Old Testament, during the time of Daniel, when the Ark was being brought back, it hit a rock and was going to fall, and 2 of the guys grabbed a hold of it. They weren't allowed to touch it, and they died instantly. So the Ark is the Ark of God, which has manna from the desert. Right? It has the 10 Commandments in the Ark, and Aaron's staff. Okay. Earlier in Exodus, we were talking later, I think it's in maybe Leviticus, it talks about Aaron's staff buds. Okay. Anybody that's ever had a stick or a cane, right, that you polish and made use for a cane, and you use it for many years, it don't bud. It rots, it falls apart. But Aaron's staff budded with flowers, leaves. So they put that in the Ark as well. But what we're getting at here is Joshua told the people to consecrate themselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do amazing things for among you. Joshua said to the priests, take up the Ark of the Covenant and pass on ahead of the people. So they took it up and went ahead of them. Now, as the Lord said to Joshua, today I will begin to exalt you in the eyes of all of Israel, so they may know that I am with you, as I was with Moses. It says, tell the priest to carry the Ark of the Covenant. When you reach the edge of the Jordan's waters, go stand in the river. So Joshua said to the Israelites, come in here and listen to the words of the Lord your God. This is how you will know that the living God is among you, and that he will certainly drive off before you the Canaanites, Hittites, and the Hivites. There's a bunch more ites there. Jebusites, Amorites, Gashites, Perizzites. Yeah, that must be where the Perizzites from. So see the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord of all the earth will go into the Jordan ahead of you. Now what's great about this is they're carrying this Ark. And as soon as they step into the river Jordan, the waters part. Right? I'm assuming part because the waters dry up. And then and the Bible specifically says this is the height of the flood season. So it ain't like, if you ever watched old Flintstone commercials or Flintstone shows, when they go to see the Grand Canyon, they just show a trickle stream of water. The Colorado River is just a little trickle stream, right? Flintstone, they show that. That's pretty funny, right? But Jordan's much bigger than that. Jordan's a large body of river. So when they step into it, the Ark of the Covenant, if you ever watched Indiana Jones, right? And the Ark of the Covenant comes near, bats, everything scatters. Right? Nothing gets near it. Except for Indiana Jones. He gets right up next to it. So anyways, it says when the water from upstream stopped flowing, it piled up in a heap a great distance away at a town called Adam in the vicinity of Zarethan. And while the water flowing down to the sea of the Arabah, that is the Dead Sea, was completely cut off. So the people crossed over opposite Jericho. The priest who carried the Ark of the Covenant stopped in the middle of the Jordan and stood on dry land while all of Israel passed by until the whole nation had completely crossing on dry ground. Now, if you remember back when they crossed the Red Sea, it talks about that Moses parted the sea, right, with his staff, be a God. You see, when you give Moses credit, it's all credit to God. One of the big problems we have in people in history have said that if God's doing work through you, they say they give credit to the people that are actually the visual people doing it, but it's always God that's doing all of it. Okay? And that's one of the things that God establishes here at the beginning of this. He says that you won't have no gods before me. I am the only God, and without me, you can do nothing. All right? So give me the credit, because I'm the one that's doing it. Okay?
Jesus says the same thing in John 15, but the law is you can't do anything.
So what he's telling these people here is recognize where your authority comes from. Okay? Because people came up to Paul and Peter, and whenever they're performing these miracles and for them, and they wanted to bow down to him, and he's like, no, you don't bow to me. You know, I do nothing except in Christ who gives me strength. Okay? So, but getting back at it, when he parted the Red Sea, it talks about the Israelites crossed over on dry land. Okay? But when the Egyptians came in behind them, they were in the mud. So that in itself is a pretty substantial miracle. And I always think about when he parted the Red Sea, can you imagine walking through and like seeing the fish on either side in the river and the ocean? Maybe a whale sticks his head out. I don't know. So the whole nation finished crossing the Jordan. The Lord said to Joshua, choose 12 men from among the people, one from each tribe, and tell them to take up 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, from right where the priests are standing, and carry them over with you. Put them down at a place where you will stay tonight. And this is another symbolic thing of recognition. Is you see that every time that say that Abraham had something significant in his life, he'd build an altar and he'd name it something. Okay. Throughout all of history of the Israelites, whenever something significant happened to them, they would take stones and build them up as a marker. And I imagine it's kind of like what we use GPS today, right? Or maps. And if something we go see a wreck on the highway, we mark it on the map. Or if we've something significant happens in our lives, we mark that date on the calendar, right? So it's something to reference back. And that's what they use here, but they use names to mark these symbols. God's telling them to take 12 stones, one for each tribe of Israel. And when you get on the Jordan, put them on the side of the where you're going to stay to mark as a symbol and as a marker. Now, anybody walking by goes, well, it's just 12 stones. These 12 stones came from the very bottom of the Jordan River. Okay? And if you study rocks, you'd think, well, this could be any stones. But if you study rocks, you'd realize those stones couldn't have came from anywhere. How'd they get them from the bottom of that Jordan River? They must have some really strong swimmers, to get down there and get them rocks. So it marks the greatness of God, just those 12 stones being stacked up. So when they crossed the river, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. The stones are to be a memorial to the people of Israel forever. So the Israelites did as Joshua commanded them, and they took 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan, according to the number of the tribes of Israelites. The Lord had told Joshua, and they carried them over with them to their camp, where they put them down. And Joshua set up the 12 stones that had been in the middle of the Jordan at a spot where the priest who carried the Ark of the Covenant had stood. And when they were, they're there to this day. That's pretty impressive. A long time for rocks not to be bothered. But then again, when I went to Jerusalem many, many years ago, I mentioned this story a couple times. The tomb of David is so sacrificial and ceremonial that they told us on the Sabbath, which would be a Saturday, no pictures. And somebody decided to take a picture. Being Americans, we're very arrogant. Screw your laws, screw your traditions, take a picture. Took a picture. I had never heard so many guns pulled with the slide bolts come across. And they were all pointing over to shoot that guy right on the spot for taking a picture. Because they desecrated their Sabbath, and he desecrated their holy of tombs of King of David. Right? So, I mean, in America, we make a big fuss if somebody burns our flag. That's their King David was considered one of their greatest kings. Okay. So, but like I said, for these stones to still be there today, it's pretty impressive. It says, now the priests who carried the ark remained standing in the middle of the Jordan until everything the Lord had commanded Joshua was done by the people. Just as Moses had directed Joshua, the people hurried over, and as soon as all of them had crossed, the ark of the Lord and the priests came to the other side while the people watched. The men of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh crossed over ready for battle in front of the Israelites as Moses had directed them. About 40,000 armed for battle crossed over before the Lord to the plains of Jericho for war. There's 40,000 troops. Okay? They don't need them. So that day the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all of Israel, and they stood in awe of him all the days of his life, just as they stood in awe of Moses. So Joshua was rebel. People stood in awe of him. They saw the greatness that God was doing for him. And much like many of our priests today, when when they do something like, Reverend Billy Graham is known for his faith walk and television ministries. People saw Billy Graham. He walked in the room. He came in with a forefront of some respect. There's many other preachers that are like that. But here Joshua gets it. And imagine at first he's walking in the shadow of Moses. Now he casts his own shadow. So
unfortunately, today Christians know very little of Joshua. They look at Moses, as you said, he stood in the shadow of Moses. Joshua is probably one of the 5 greatest men from Genesis, at least up to David. At least one of the 5 greatest men of those years. But always sees Moses. Oh, he was Moses that helped him. He was Moses that back. He was a wonderful.
Yeah, and at first I imagine that they didn't. They go wink and what do you know? You listen to Moses. You just listen to Moses. What do you know? And God worked them through Joshua. When Joshua says, "Do this," and when they did it, it all fell into place as Joshua had said. And they started to believe and to follow Joshua.
It takes a humble man to stand in the shadow of a man like Moses.
Yeah. Aaron had some difficulties with it.
Yeah.
So
did Mary, his sister.
So on the 10th day of the first month, the people went up from the Jordan and camped at Gilgal on the eastern border of Jericho. Joshua set up at Gilgal 12 stones that they had taken out of the Jordan. And he said to the Israelites, in the future, when your descendants ask your parents, what do these stones mean? Tell them, you shall cross the Jordan on dry ground, for the Lord your God dried up the Jordan before you until you had crossed over. The Lord your God did to the Jordan what he had done to the Red Sea when he dried it up before us until we had crossed over. So he's, I don't know how the Israelite people remember or write it down, because word of mouth is not a good storytelling. Things change from time to time. It's like a telephone drill. You ever seen a telephone drill? Anybody familiar with the telephone drill? You put like 20 people in a line and you read off a card to the first person.
Yes.
They don't get the card, but they turn around to the person behind them and tell the story. It goes all the way to the end, and when you reach the last person, it's never the same as when it started.
There's no reason to believe that he wasn't recognized. The art of writing goes back well before Moses. It goes back to the ancient Sumerians, and that's the earliest civilization we discovered yet, which was at least 1,000 years before Moses. So, undoubtedly, all this was written down. But one of the reasons that those stones remain placed, pagan religions, I'm not saying that Joshua and the Jews were that, but even pagan religions, when you set up a monument to your God, nobody touched it. Because your God would become angry and lash out at you. Now, I think probably to some extent the pagans knew the significance. They knew what the cross was bringing up tells in this. They don't touch their stuff. They hate them, but God the Jews.
But it would probably be symbolic, or a symbol in a way of touching a Roman citizen. As Paul put out, he goes, you guys gave me lashes without a trial. You tried me, and I'm a Roman citizen. And they were scared because you can touch a Roman citizen without a trial. They're like American citizens. You're given the authority and protection of the government and the army. So as American citizens, if I guess theoretically, if you go to another country and they try you and convict you, and trying you, they just convict you and kill you, then there's some repercussions for that symbol, that very act. So now he says, now all the Amorite kings west of the Jordan and all the Canaanite kings on the coast had heard how the Lord had dried up the Jordan before the Israelites until they had crossed over. Their hearts melted in fear, and they no longer had the courage to face the Israelites. Now, like I said, when you send out the rumors of what's going to happen, and a lot of times we do such things, is we'll send people into another country, and they'll talk about how great something happened. We'll say how great the American forces, how significant the American forces are. You don't want to face them. And word of mouth travels pretty quick, right? Instead of getting into the battle and finding out, they already heard he dried up the Jordan River. They knew it firsthand. The water's backed up clear to the city of Adam. And I'm pretty sure, it ain't like what you say, well, we've got a flood season going on here. And you say down south at the Red Sea, there's no water at all. The dam up the river is pretty impressive. God's not that, you can do it easily. So the time of the Lord came to Joshua and made the flint knives to circumcise the Israelites again. And one of the things to distinguish God's people was they had to be circumcised. And this was long before, back with Abraham. It was a symbol that these were God's people. Now, they had abandoned God, and after many generations that passed over, in the wilderness, then Joshua, them coming in, they were all new. So God says to Joshua, go back to the ceremonies, making everybody circumcised. But we don't have to do that today. We have Christ in our life, and it's no longer necessary. We don't follow the symbolisms of the law, because Christ fulfilled every aspect of the law. So when we get down here, it says, then the Lord said to Joshua, today I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you. So the place has been called Gilgal to this day. I looked up the word Gilgal to see if it had some special meaning to it, and it pretty much just means rolled away. And it's again, very symbolic of the stone that was rolled away, and it's very symbolic of the way they passed into the Jordan area, across the Jordan, was symbolic when they crossed the Red Sea. So they came out of captivity and went into wilderness, where they had to, like a cleansing of generations. The new generations coming out, they crossed over the Jordan, and they're going into the promised land. So it's, from old to new. Okay? That same symbolism is when we become Christians in our life. All things that are old have passed away. We go through a cleansing period, and we are a new creation. Okay? So like I said, it's all a matter of symbolism. This is all great bill of symbolism with the going into Jericho. So now when Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up, and there was a man before him with a sword drawn in his hand. Joshua went up to him and asked, are you for us or for our enemies? And he says, neither. He replied, but as the commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come. Then Joshua fell face down to the ground in reverence and asked him, what message does my Lord have for his servant? The commander of the Lord replied, take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy. And Joshua did so. This is, again, this is a minor symbolism. God gave Moses direction at the burning bush, and he told him to take off your sandals, for the ground you stand on is holy. Here, it's just an army of God, or the commander of the guards, army of God. So he says, now the gates of Jericho were securely barred because of the Israelites. No one went out, no one came in. You remember when they sent the spies into Jericho, all right, they were so scared that they barred the gates so that no one could leave and no one could come in or out, because they were trying to catch the spies they thought were in the city. But Rahab lowered them down how, to across the city walls so they could escape. They just didn't know. So the gates remained shut. And now I didn't read up on how thick the walls were of Jericho, but things I read before was that you could ride a chariot across the top of them. They were pretty big. It was substantial in the sense that, you didn't have like, you see the castles in the medieval times when they just had a rampart there and they march along and barely enough room for two people to pass. So my understanding is the walls were very thick. And the Lord said to Joshua, see, I have delivered Jericho into your hands along with its kings and its fighting men. March around the city once with all the armed men and do this for 6 days. Now I have 7 priests carry trumpets of rams, horns in the front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times with the priests blowing the trumpets. When they hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have the whole army give a loud shout, and the wall of the city will collapse and the army will go up and everyone straight in. Now, I don't know if you ever heard of anything to go on in search of. They were talking about like in search of Sodom and Gomorrah. They found this, brimstone. Can't really say that's a city because God said it was wiped from the face of the earth. The only reason we know about it is drinking scripture. But one of the things they talked about was that there was a massive earthquake on the day that the Jericho walls fell. And the parting of the Red Sea, one of the things they covered was there just happened to be a volcanic eruption, and it pulled the water from the tide, and it pulled the water back, right? I think just, those things happening just at that particular point in time, was amazing.
There's an old TV series back maybe in the 60s, 70s, Time Tunnel. In one episode, it shows Jericho and the earthquake or whatever. And one of the younger scientists said, see? The older guy said, why and how could it happen at just the right moment? God uses nature. In fact, in the Old Testament, the word angel just means messenger, and sometimes that's the elements. Sometimes it's the winged creature, sometimes it's men. God uses what he created. And who's going to calm down on it? I'm not going to calm down. He can do what he pleases.
I had reference, and I can't find it, to the symbolism of the 7 horns, 7 times around the city. 7 is considered to be a complete number, okay? But that's symbolic to the Revelation times, right? 7 trumpets, right? And the devastation that comes with the 7 trumpets, okay? There's some symbolism in this, but the 7 is, they had 7 horns, 7 times around the city, and the people shouting, right? And I've even read and seen on certain circumstances where they said, well, maybe it was the frequency, such a case that when the horns blew and the people shouted, that it vibrated the walls apart. Okay? Whatever it was, it worked. So,
When you limit out God, it becomes imperative that we start finding solutions. Ridiculous as they might be.
yeah, there's always somebody out there trying to do, take it away from God in such a fashion to say, well, it was an earthquake. It wasn't God. Yeah, okay. He makes the earthquakes and doesn't make the earthquakes. So, but they told him to follow along behind the Ark of the Covenant. So Joshua go up early the next morning, and the priests took up the Ark of the Lord. The 7 priests carrying 7 trumpets were put on forward, marching before the Ark of the Lord and blowing trumpets. The armed men went ahead of them, and the rear guard followed the Ark of the Lord, while the trumpets kept sounding. So on the 2nd day, they marched around the city once and returned to the camp. They did this for 6 days. On the 7th day, they got up at daybreak and marched around the city 7 times in the same manner, except that on that day, they circled the city 7 times. The 7th time around, when the priest sounded the trumpet blast, Joshua commanded the army, shout, for the Lord has given you the city and all that is in it, are to be devoted to the Lord. Only Rahab the prostitute and all who are with her in her house shall be spared, because she hid the spies we sent. But keep away from the devoted things, so that you are not to bring upon your own destruction by taking any of them. And we saw this when King Saul was supposed to destroy all the Amalekites. We kept the very best for God. You kept the very best for yourself. God didn't want any of that. He told you to get rid of all of it. Get rid of all. One thing that pops in my head though when they were trumping now, every day they marched around the city, right, and blew trumpets, right, or they marched around the city. And imagine the people in there probably thinking, these people are fools. And yeah, see how big these walls are? There they go, marching around the city again. And then probably some hecklers up on the top, heckling them and yelling at them. Marching around the city. Where's your God? Where's he now? He's got you guys working in circles. But on that seventh day, when they blew the trumpets, I can imagine the fear returned pretty quick to them when the walls fell. It says, all the silver and golden articles of bronze and iron are sacred to the Lord and must go into his treasury. When the trumpet sounded, the army shouted, and the sound of the trumpet, when the men gave a loud shout, the walls collapsed. So everyone charged straight in and took the city. They devoted the city to the Lord and destroyed the sword, every living thing in it, men, women, children. It says men, women, young and old, cattle, sheep, and donkeys. Joshua said to the old men, to the two men who had spied out the land, go into the prostitute's house and bring her out, and all of who belong to her, in accordance with your oath to her. So the young men who had done the spying went in and brought out Rahab, her father, her mother, her brothers and sisters, and all who belonged to her. They brought out her entire family and then put them in a place outside the camp of Israel. And then they burned the whole city and everything in it. But they put the silver, gold, and articles of bronze and iron in the treasure of the Lord's house. But Joshua spared Rahab, the prostitute, with her family and all that belonged to her, because she hid Joshua's spies at Jericho. And she lives among the Israelites to this day. It says, at that time Joshua pronounced this solemn oath, cursed before the Lord is the one who undertakes to rebuild the city Jericho. At the cost of his firstborn son, he would lay its foundations. At the cost of his youngest, he would set up its gates. So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame spread throughout the land. So that's what I have with Joshua. And it's amazing that you can find a symbolism between what happened then and what happens. It seems like everything repeats itself in doing things, right? And well, that's all I thought. I just noticed there is no Jericho out there today that I know.
There is, the curse of Joshua, under one of the kings, the divided kingdom, rebuilt it and had a man called Hiel build it. It says that he laid the foundations in his first son. First son died, and something else in the second son. And it says, fulfilled the curse of Joshua. I think Joshua became part of the Northern Kingdom.